We all know about the top tier free agents. We've spent a lot of time talking about them. Aaron Judge, Trea Turner, on and on and on. But who are those second tier guys that the Giants could target? What about a guy named Cody Bellinger? If he's non-tendered by the Dodgers, should the Giants be interested in signing him? So we'll get to those questions and many others on today's mailbag edition of Locked On Giants.
You are Locked On Giants, your daily San Francisco Giants podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello and welcome to Locked On Giants, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, where it's your team every day. My name is Ben Kaspick, and on this show we provide daily episodes Monday through Friday talking about the San Francisco Giants in a way that's data-driven and rational, but also simple, passionate, and accessible to all. I'm a former contributor for the baseball statistics and analysis websites Beyond the Box Score and Rotographs. I've been podcasting about the Giants since 2015, and I'm a lifelong fan. Thank you for making Locked On Giants your first listen every day. We're free and available wherever you get podcasts. Today's episode of Locked On Giants is sponsored by SimpliSafe Home Security with Fast Protect technology exclusively from SimpliSafe. 24/7 monitoring agents capture evidence to accurately verify a threat for a faster police response. There's no safe like SimpliSafe. Visit simplisafe.com/lockedonmlb to learn more. And coming up on today's show, as I said, mailbag questions. Thank you so much to everyone who submitted questions on Twitter. The first round of questions, basically four people had similar questions, and they are essentially, what is the second tier of free agent? Aiden says, who are some players you think the Giants would pick up who may not be star talent, but could patch some holes for our roster, or could patch some holes our roster has now? Deleted User says, who are some mid-range outfielders they could target? Steve says, what's the backup to the backup plan if they miss out on the top free agents? So yeah, I mean, a lot of people have asked this same question. I think it's a good one, and it's partially born out of the Giants consistently not landing the top free agents, right? And so we want to know, okay, yeah, we know about Judge and all those other guys, but if they don't get them, who's left? Who could this team realistically target? And for me, I'm just going to go through some of the names I've highlighted as I am going through all of the top free agents. Some of the guys who aren't considered those top tier guys. How about Willson Contreras at the catcher position? I know that the Giants have Joey Bart, and there's obviously a lot of hope for Joey Bart, being he was a number 2 overall draft pick a few years ago, several years ago now, in 2018. But when all is said and done, he just hasn't performed very well at the major league level. And, you know, we're talking about trade possibilities. The Giants have a young catcher with promise that they could trade for some area of need at another position. And Willson Contreras is just an established, very good major league catcher, especially as a hitting catcher. And so it would give you something that not a lot of teams have, which is offense at the catcher position. And also we may see, because Willson Contreras not known as a great framer, I think he's improved perhaps, but still, it's not necessarily a strength of his. But I've always really liked Willson Contreras. I thought maybe they should trade for him last offseason, but now he is a pure free agent. He's a name that not a lot of people are talking about, but someone to pay attention to, because I think the catcher position for the Giants is a little less settled than it may seem, if that makes sense. And how about at first base? There's a couple of guys I like in Jose Abreu. I think could make a lot of sense for the Giants, but more of a question like, would he want to play here? Because not the best place to hit, and if you're going to be able to, you'd have a lot of interest. The thing is, he's, I think, 36 years old, so it'd be a short-term deal, but he's been durable in his career, and there's a lot of leadership qualities to Jose Abreu, and also I just like the way he performs. There's Josh Bell. Padres have been eliminated. We saw a little bit of Bell here in the postseason. Kind of streaky, not the best defender, but I like the way he can hit. He's a guy who's out there. Giants have an unsettled kind of first base right now. Anthony Rizzo can opt out of one more year on his Yankees deal, and I like him in a similar manner to Jose Abreu and Josh Bell as not elite players, but quality major league players. There's also Brandon Drury, who can play all over the diamond. Gene Segura, there's a $17 million club option. He's sneakily a good defender, and we've seen that on display with the Phillies in the postseason here. I wouldn't be thrilled. He's certainly like a mid-tier player, but at the same time, good defender and makes a lot of contact. And I've mentioned before, kind of like a Tyro Estrada type player. I'm not sure he's the best fit, but just wanted to throw his name out there. And then when we look at third baseman, how about Justin Turner as a possibility? There's a $16 million club option that may be turned down. We shall see. I'm not sure how realistic he is. And then in the outfield, there's not a lot of guys when I look through, kind of quickly looking through the free agent outfielder possibilities. Jock Pederson is one of them. I think he would, just like he did this year, kind of plug a hole on this team. He shouldn't be your best hitter, your best player, but as a kind of, role player, platoon bat, I could see Jock Pederson certainly filling a hole and taking up a role on the Giants, and he'll be out there. And then there's Mitch Haniger as well, local guy from the Bay Area and reaching free agency for the first time. He's an intriguing guy for me. Approach is a little bit not necessarily what the Giants like, kind of a free swinger, but at the same time has a lot of power and is just a quality major league player. And so that's kind of it. Trey Mancini, also a possibility, but those are kind of the names that come to mind when I look through the free agent offensive players. Pitching is a whole different story, but I'm not sure they will go after kind of mid-tier pitching. I think they're more likely to shop at the top of the market for one starting pitcher. Depth, certainly, in addition, but they need position players, I think, more than they need pitching right now. Bullpen, different story, but they're not going to shop at the super top of the market for bullpen arms, in my opinion. I would not expect. So anyway, coming up in just a minute, there's also the non-tender players, like guys who are under club control but will get released into free agency. And Cody Bellinger is, I would say, perhaps even likely to be non-tendered by the Dodgers, thus making him a free agent. Does he make sense for the Giants if that happens and he is available to sign? We'll get to that in just a minute. But before we do, as everyone knows, athletes rise and fall in the ranks all the time. But when it comes to saving money, Simply Safe always stays on top. And right now you can save big with Simply Safe Home Security. They're giving listeners 40% off their advanced security system. Simply Safe has just been named the best home security system of 2022 by US News. I use it, I love it, and I know that you'll love it too, because at Simply Safe, your safety is the only thing that matters. And honestly, for me, I haven't actually had an issue like a break-in or anything like that, but it's great to know I'm protected, and it's really convenient, and the app is great to use. You can check in on your home and all the different cameras at any time with crystal clear HD quality. It's just, for me, something that makes me feel really safe and protected at all times, even when I'm away from home. 24/7 professional monitoring costs less than $1 a day, which is less than half the cost of ADT's traditional professional installed plans. Don't miss this chance to save big when you protect your home with the best. Get 40% off your order when you visit simplysafe.com/LockedOnMLB today. Customize the perfect system for your home in just a few minutes. That's simplysafe.com/LockedOnMLB. Go today. There's no safe like Simply Safe. All right, as promised, more questions and answers. This one about Cody Bellinger is really interesting because I do believe it is a distinct possibility that he gets non-tendered by the Dodgers. We could do a whole episode talking about Cody Bellinger's career, but I'll just summarize it as he was so good, won an MVP award in his, early 20s, mid-20s, and then celebrating a home run in, was it the World Series in 2020? He dislocated his shoulder doing one of those kind of shoulder bump, fist bump things, forearm bumps with a teammate, dislocated his shoulder, required surgery, and he has just not been good ever since. He's been one of the worst offensive players in baseball the last couple of years. He's been very good defensively in center field, though, and of course, there's always the potential, the tantalizing potential that you can help him get back to the form that he showed when he was at his best, which was literally like one of the very best players in baseball. So if he gets non-tendered, I think there will be a lot of interest. The question is from Thomas, by the way, who says, say Bellinger is non-tendered. Are you adding him for a mid-range 2 to 3 year deal with options and starting him in center field batting ninth, assuming we have flexibility for a bigger free agent or two? So yeah, picking up Bellinger would be not the kind of deal that would prevent you from doing anything else. I think ultimately he doesn't get a very big deal, which is why he would be non-tendered at a estimated salary of $18 million or so. I think he'd probably like to stay with the Dodgers, although his playing time kind of diminished. He wasn't starting in the playoffs, even against right-handed pitching. And so maybe actually it is a good opportunity for him to go to another team. I think he probably makes more sense on a team that is not trying to win like right this second, and maybe a deal with opt-outs, maybe like the structure of Carlos Correa's deal, but obviously less expensive, which was a 3-year deal, but opt-outs after every year. And so for Bellinger, if he figures it out, he would be able to trigger the right to opt out and re-enter the market coming off a big year. And if he doesn't, he can opt in and keep staying. So I think that it is something the Giants should take a look at. It depends on whether they believe he has any chance of getting back to being anything like the player he was, because it has been dramatic. He's not just been okay, he's been bad offensively, but pretty good defensively to the point where he's still a fine player, kind of like Trent Grisham, right? Like Trent Grisham has value even though he had a miserable offensive season because of what he does in the field, on the bases, when he gets on base. So yeah, I mean, I wouldn't guarantee him 2 or 3 years, but I mean, maybe, depending on the average annual value. He's certainly someone to watch, and the first step will be, does he get non-tendered? And if he does, I think the Giants and pretty much every other team, including the Dodgers trying to bring him back, would make some sense to one degree or another. Next question, these are all similar. Soy Larry says, possible offer for Aaron Judge or Trea Turner. Brody Blue Horseshoe says, what do you think is a realistic offer for Judge? And do you see the Giants offering big? CJ says, Judge would be the most flashy signing, but would he be the best option? Michael says, how concerned are you about Aaron Judge's age if we do sign him? And then lastly, King of Norway says, how much did Judge hurt his anticipated AAV with the bad postseason that he just had? And that he doesn't look like a $300 million contract we would want to have. So a lot packed in here. In terms of the possible offer for Aaron Judge, I don't really think that the postseason changed it much. If anything, like some of the hysterical thinking has been washed away a little bit, because even at the end of the regular season as well, when he was chasing that 60-second home run, a lot of us were tuning in to like every at bat, and he was not getting a lot of hits. He was striking out a lot, and then that kind of carried over into the postseason. The walks dried up. He was just kind of an automatic out at times during the playoffs for the Yankees, which is now over. May have taken his last at bat as a Yankee last night in a sweep to the Astros. But a realistic offer for Judge, it hasn't really changed for me. I continue to say that those saying he'll get upwards of $40 million a year, I don't see that happening. And a lot of times the argument is like, look at who are the highest paid players in the game on an average annual value from an AAV perspective. And we say, look, Max Scherzer's getting $43.3 million a year, but it's a 3-year deal for Scherzer. For Judge, if it's a 3-year deal, then yeah, he should get $43 million a year or something in that range. I don't know. Or even more. But when you're talking about a 7 or 8 year deal for a guy who's going to be 31 in year one of that deal, so literally 37, 38 at the end of a 7 or 8 year deal, then the AAV is not going to be upwards of $40 million. And so I keep saying, like, think maybe 35 over 8 years, which would be 8 years, $280 million. Maybe give or take, $20 million. Maybe he gets that $300 million number. But in terms of like possible offer, are you saying from the Giants? I think that is kind of the insinuation here, is what is a realistic offer for Judge, and do you see the Giants? I think realistic. I think the Giants would probably prefer something 7 years versus 8, and I'm sure they'd prefer 4 or 5 versus 6 or 7. And so it kind of depends. I don't know, maybe 6 years, and maybe you do push the AAV a little bit to 37.5 or something. And then that only comes out to, what did I say, 6 years? Let's 37.5 million times 7 years would be 262.5. So somewhere in the range of 7 years and somewhere in the range of $270 million, like give or take plus or minus $30 million, give or take a year here or there, it's going to be probably somewhere in that range. And yes, I do have concerns about the age. And I've said this over and over. If you've listened to the show on the regular, you've heard me say over and over that I definitely have concerns about giving out a 7 or 8 year deal to a guy who's going to be 31 in year one. And so he would be the most flashy signing, but would he be the best? Not necessarily, in my opinion. Some of the hysteria has gone away. Like, I think even teams were wrapped up in it. Like, give him whatever he wants. Give him 400. I do not understand the $400 million talk. If he was 26, it would be a totally different story versus 31. Because teams take into account, like, what your age is going to be in every year, and they project what you're going to do based on your talent level and just age, because age comes for us all, and it comes for major league players, and the performance is going to get worse as the contract goes on. And so they take that into account, and that is baked into what they ultimately offer. But if you're 26, there's so many more prime years. Basically, Judge is going to start to regress, we would think, in a couple years into that deal. But if you're 26, you're like peak for 5 years or so, and teams will pay for that. So would he be the best? Not necessarily. And I'm the more we talk about this, the more I'm tilting towards youth and looking at the guys who are younger. And does that make more sense for the Giants? Because they are a team that is not reckless, clearly, with their spending. They haven't even landed any of these guys. The closest they came, I will keep pointing this out, we know that they offered Bryce Harper, who was 26. That is the big, most important factor as to why he was the guy who got this kind of offer from them. They offered him 12 years and $310 million. He was 26. Judge is 31. And anyway, looking at some of the guys who are out there, in terms of age, I'm going to sort by age on this little list I made for some of my favorite targets. Carlos Correa is the youngest. He's going to be in his age 28 season. I think he just turned 28 within a month of now. So he's 28, but he'll be 28 for all of next year. The Giants just brought in Pete Patella from, the Astros organization. So there's a familiarity there, and maybe it kind of softens the blow and all the controversy with the cheating stuff. Dansby Swanson is going to be in his age 29 season. Trea Turner, age 30 season. Xander Bogaerts, age 30 season. So some of these guys may end up getting significantly smaller deals than Judge, but may end up performing just as well as Judge. And so I'm not sure that Judge is necessarily the best play for the Giants. It may be Carlos Correa. Others have pointed out to me I have had a blind spot for Carlos Correa, and I kind of agree. It was the 2017 Astros cheating stuff that turned me off of Correa, but the more I think about the fit and the age and all that, it could make a lot of sense. There's also a big rivalry with LA with Correa, and that could only kind of add fuel to the fire and maybe be a good thing for a Giants team in need of a little edge, perhaps you could say. So coming up in just a minute, we'll get to more questions. We'll talk about Correa a little bit more and Anthony DeSclafani and what the Giants are going to do with him. Should they release him? That is a question we'll get to in just a minute. But first, all right, as promised, more questions and answers. We're actually not, I already answered this. Jack says, do you think the Patella hire makes a Carlos Correa to San Francisco, makes Carlos Correa to San Francisco a lot more likely? I don't know about a lot more likely, but probably makes it more likely, in my opinion. Yes, I think so, but maybe not a lot. Big Guy says, how can the Giants get rid of DeSclafani? Just buy him out, release? So, no offense, I just don't understand this. I don't understand why the Giants, they shouldn't be desperate to just get rid of Anthony DeSclafani, because I just have not gotten this at all since basically the start of the year when he was struggling and people wanted him basically gone. he ultimately made 5 starts for the Giants this year and pitched 20 innings in 2022. And we want him released. And he was so injured that he required season-ending surgery that had like a 7-month or 8-month recovery time. So, the performance this year was obviously affected by the injury to his heel that he had. It was the heel, right? Yeah. And in 2021, he threw 167 and 2/3 innings and had a 3.17 ERA. I get that he didn't pitch great in his one postseason appearance against the Dodgers, and he didn't pitch great against the Dodgers all year. And great is an understatement. He pitched poorly against LA all year. But that's it. Not that you should ignore it, you should take the whole picture into account, which was a 3.17 ERA. So it is a sunk cost, right? So they're paying this no matter what. I don't see why just releasing him would be a solution. Like what they really ought to be trying to do is getting him healthy and back to the point that he was a really good pitcher, deserving of this 3-year, $36 million deal. It's now a 2-year, $24 million deal. It's really a minor kind of deal that's not taking up a lot of payroll space. And what they should do with him is help him rehab and have him be a contributor again in 2023 like he really was in 2021. They don't win 107 games without Anthony DeSclafani. He was a big part of their success in 2021. He's not an ace. They're not paying him like an ace. So he doesn't need to be that. He can be mid-rotation, back rotation. It's really that kind of money for DeSclafani. So Deposed Royalty says, which playoff team that is out of the postseason do you think could have benefited from trading for Rodon? I think most could have benefited from trading for Rodon. Yeah, all of them. Pretty much every team that has been eliminated could have benefited a lot from trading for Rodon. But if I had to say which team the most could have benefited from it, I would probably say, Seattle comes to mind, the way that they used Robbie Ray. Robbie Ray was kind of not making starts towards the end there and came out of the bullpen, and that would have helped them certainly. I think that the Cardinals also come to mind as a strong, as a team that really could have used him. They ended up getting swept in that first round. And, the Dodgers, the Padres, every team that's been eliminated, but I think St. Louis and Seattle stand out to me the most because those were teams that didn't necessarily have that impact front line. Probably St. Louis more than any other team. They ended up, it was a best of 3 and they lost immediately. And the starting pitchers they used, like Jose Quintana and Miles Michaelis, right? I think those were the 2 starters they used. Those guys are not true impact starting pitchers, and having Rodon in that mix could have given them a better shot to win at least one of those games. So actually, that is all the time we have for today. I'm sorry about that. Thanks again for making Locked On Giants your first listen today. Now make your second listen the Locked On Sports Today podcast, the biggest stories of the day, plus instant reaction, big game recaps, and the take of the day. This is really can't miss. It's basically the new way to consume the day's sports news from each of the local experts of Locked On. Whatever's the biggest story, you hear the local expert give their take, and I just think it's a very, very good way to consume your daily news in sports. It's available on the Odyssey app, YouTube, and wherever you get podcasts. Locked On Sports Today. Once again, my name's Ben Kaspick. Check me out on Twitter at Ben Kaspick, Kaspick. If you like this show, please consider rating it or leaving a review. Helps me out a lot, so thank you in advance, and thanks to everyone who's done so already. Can't wait to be with you again tomorrow. Thanks again for listening. You are now Locked On Giants.